Hi, everybody. For this episode, we're joined by Vanessa Rogers from London, England. Vanessa is a trainer, has authored over 20 books that are published worldwide, and is a youth worker practitioner. Vanessa also delivers the professional qualifications for the National Youth Agency in the United Kingdom. In addition to all that, every year she returns to face-to-face youth work for 3 months to stay grounded. Vanessa, thanks for being a guest on The Passionate Youth Worker.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here. I'm eager to do my first interview with somebody from the United Kingdom. So let's get started. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
Vanessa, you clearly have a passion for supporting young people, and you certainly have carved out a unique way of doing it. When we were getting to know each other, you mentioned your mom always encouraged you to be individualistic. And it seems like you took that message right to heart. Let's begin this episode talking about your family and your mom. And can you just tell us a little bit about that? What was your early years like?
So my early years, I guess, I felt hard done by. I was the eldest, so often the one that was blamed for things or took charge. But actually, it kind of fit my personality because I've been doing it ever since. But yeah, I had a good childhood. Grew up in the East End of London. And if any of your kind of listeners want to see that, Call the Midwife is filmed pretty much where I come from. But I never felt poor, that I come from a big family, very supportive network. And it probably took me a long time to realise that not everybody had that. And whilst that might at times have felt just a little bit like you couldn't get away with anything because somebody always saw you, there's always a strength as well of having an aunt and an uncle and a someone and a grandmother, someone that is there and will give you a bit of time. And I guess that's what I try and put across to young people. Maybe I think youth workers, we offer that someone. If they don't have anybody else, sometimes we are that person that is just an adult who has got the space and the time to listen without judging, and talking it through. Yeah, I think that's true. And I've got a big family of my own. I went on to have plenty of children. So I like the hustle and bustle and the noise.
Yeah, perfect for youth work settings, right? To kind of be living in the ever fluid situation that's always changing, always something new to deal with. But I wanted to stick with this idea about individualism, and your mom taught you to be and encouraged you to be individualistic. How did that desire to find yourself and to be your own person play out when you were younger? How did you go about finding your identity?
Mine was very much through art. I always thought I'd be an artist. I didn't realise that for an artist, I was a pretty good writer. I was always good at English. I think I wrote my first book when I was about 7, one summer holiday. All escapists.
Wow.
I found it. Wow. I found it when my mum and dad finally downsized. Terrible. But at the time, I carried it round with me, like a precious piece of work. But I through art, I loved art, loved music, always loved music, and loved music, the way you can express yourself through colours and clothes and play with that kind of gender identity, sexuality, everything. Loved all of it. And realised that music allows you to be more than one thing. So, you can express different sides of yourself. And I'm sure my mum used to tut. Well, I know she did. She used to despair at times. But I was never stopped in doing it. So I was encouraged. So when I was a punk and I dyed my hair pink, it was my mum that dyed it for me. She'd rather be involved doing it, even though she deeply disapproved.
Wow, that sounds like a wonderful parenting strategy to encourage your young people, or your children, I should say, to be themselves and help them grow into who they ought to be and what their niche is and what their skills and their interests are. But yet knowing that's going to create some uncomfortableness for them. That is really a great lesson that she set you up with, and perfect for doing youth work for sure, and raising your own family. as well. So this idea you went punk and you had pink hair, and it sometimes caused a little grief and anxiety for your parents, probably because you were being so individualistic. Like you really took it seriously almost. And what did that mean for you in school? Did that play out well there and in your social world? How did all that ideas about being individualistic play out outside of the home?
Well, school doesn't really like individuals, does it? And you're supposed to conform. I'm not very good at conforming. I don't understand. If I can't understand something, I want to ask why. So why does it matter if I'm not wearing a school skirt and I want to wear trousers because it's cold? Why is that a problem? And if you can't give me a good reason, it's the rules. Well, then if it's not sensible, the rules need to change. And I wasn't being naughty or difficult. I just didn't make sense to me. So, yeah, I was popular with my peer group, not popular with teachers. Had a really difficult time at school, actually. Really didn't like it. Didn't fit within that structure. It wasn't creative enough. I loved the art room. I had a lovely art teacher that inspired me. But both my parents said they used to absolutely just dread parents' evening because it would always be, guess what she's done now. But I was never, there were really naughty kids in my school. And I wasn't one of those. But I was the one that was always in trouble. Yeah. So I was always, and I didn't finish, I ended up being kicked out of school in the end.
Oh, I was going to ask you about grades. Despite like the kind of your willingness to question authority, question rules, and think deep about things, were your grades okay? And then so that was going to be my question, but at the very end there, you said you got kicked out of school. Can you talk about like grades and why were you kicked out of school?
So my grades are terrible, actually. I find it embarrassing now. I did all those years in school, 5 years in school, and I got a handful of exams. I was in the top set for everything. Really high IQ, very clever, allegedly.
Yeah.
Terribly. But I'm also one of those people that was quite irritated, so I can read the book the night before. And then I do really well in the exam. So in exams where it was tested like that, you just had to learn it and then regurgitate it. But yeah, I just didn't apply myself. It's as simple as that. I was so busy doing other things that I didn't apply myself. And then I got into trouble for dyeing my hair, and it was the final straw. So I was allowed to come back into school to sit my exams, but I was not allowed to continue into what we call the sixth form here. So it's when you do your A-levels, ready to go. So I had to go back later. I went back after I had children, did my qualifications, because I didn't have enough to do anything with. Got into art college on the strength of my portfolio, and they said they'd take me unconditionally. It didn't matter if I got any grades or not. And I took that, I guess, as being another excuse not to really make much effort. So pitched up at college, loved it. Loved art college. Absolutely worked my socks off there. Loved it. Hated school.
So here you were, a smart person, high IQ, good artistic skills, excellent writer, and yet you couldn't find your niche in school. And
no.
And so I'm wondering, that must have played some sort of influence on you for your future decision at some point to help other young people who were finding a similar kind of scenario in their life where they knew they had skills, they knew they had talents, but they just couldn't fit in or there was not support systems around them to help them. Do you think there's a connection there? Do you think like your childhood and your experiences have parallel your work today?
Definitely. I was brought up, and actually I was far closer to my dad than my mum, but very much around, if you put your mind to it, you work hard, you can more or less do anything. You can try. And I realised that sometimes school and those places are just not the right environment. For me, they were so busy messing around worrying about the height of my heels on my shoes and the colour of my hair.
Yeah.
That they weren't looking beyond that. There was no nurturing, there was no, hang on a minute, you're good at this. So why is, as a teacher now, I would be questioning, well, why is it I'm not getting through to this kid? I can see she's got all the necessary smarts, so why is she not achieving? And I realised that I wasn't alone, that there were loads of girls and other young people who sit in classrooms just like I did, and it just goes, they come out and they're nowhere near fulfilling their achievements. So for some people it's great, but that got me looking at different learning styles, and for some people they need different ways to connect, and definitely youth work. I don't think there are unreachable young people or those young people, you can't engage with them. We just haven't found a way to engage with them yet. We haven't found what clicks for them and what turns them on. Because when you do that, you can see the minute that it happens, and suddenly they're interested and you've got them. And that's perfect, because everybody's got a potential. And whatever that might be, everybody's got something to say, and everybody has a right to say it and to fulfill their achievements, to be the best version of themselves, I guess.
I loved what you said about everybody is able to be connected with. We just sometimes don't know how to figure that out.
Yeah.
And I often think that youth work is part science. I mean, you have to understand the basics of developmental years, mental health basics, communication skills. You have to understand those things. But a big part of this job is the creative side of that. And I can see how you brought your creativity into your work, is that you have to know how to connect with young people. And there's no magic bullet. There's nothing that says this is how you do it for every young person. It's up to the youth worker to find to find that connection, to build that trust and do that work. So do you see it that way too, where the creativity and the art side of youth work is a really important component to it?
Yeah, for sure. And I found that a lot of young people that perhaps aren't doing so well in school, maybe academics, is not for them. Creativity can be a completely different route. And I also recognise that, and I'm happy with that it may be that it's that young person is not going to connect with me, but hey, they might connect with you, Paul. And, it's my job to kind of facilitate that so they get to see you, and that's the person they connect with. Whereas, in school, it has to look like this. And I understand that, because the teachers have got to get that at the end. They're working towards that. Whereas youth work is around skills for life. You're helping somebody hopefully learn the skills to navigate adult life safely, to be able to make good choices for themselves, to understand about consequences, but also to express their emotions, how they feel, what they want, what really drives them, and that's why I think we have to figure out what drives us so that we can be good youth workers, because I'm not back there fighting the good fight for them again. I'm not rewriting history from what went wrong for me through those young people. That's not helpful either. This is about, what works for them, and let's see. And that might be music, it might be drama, it might be art, it might be none of those things. It is maths or science or taking them up a mountain, it's outdoor ed. There's all sorts of things that might be what gets them. And it's just finding that little key.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I want to follow up with a question about that, but we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I want to talk more about this creative side of youth work. So we'll be right back. Vanessa, right before the break, I was saying I wanted to follow up with the creative side of youth work, and I'm wondering, you teach and instruct, you've written so many books about youth work, but that creative side of things, do you teach that or instruct people on that? And if you do, can that be taught to people? Or is that a natural instinct that you think people either have or don't have, to just say, no matter what the scenario is, I'm going to figure out a way for this young person to feel engaged and feel connected and empowered?
There's a few questions in there. So first of all, that's how I came into youth work, doing community art. And so it was very much like graffiti projects and all that stuff. and found that, it was something that turned a lot of young people on. They enjoyed it. And every so often I like to go back and just challenge those preconceptions about white middle-aged women and graffiti by grabbing the spray cans one more time and just doing a couple of stars or a tag or something. And young people's faces are like, whoa, did she just do that? So that's quite nice. In terms of using that creativity, I mean, I've done workshops with other youth workers, getting them involved and showing them how to use everything from, I don't know, doing body casts to designing clothes on people to recycle fashion shows to whatever it might be, small 5-minute projects through to big projects that are all art-based. I tend to use creativity or creative ideas in some way just because that's how my brain works. So I'm very visual. And I guess it's encouraging other people. So some of my books they always have an element of art-based activities in there. But it's usually a vehicle to get people talking. So it doesn't really matter what the vehicle is. You could be creative baking a cake. It doesn't matter. It's about that conversation and building that relationship. And so I'll give you an example. I'm doing a load of work. One of the was recent is around porn. So one of the things that fascinated me about pornography was actually about the fashion for waxing pubic hair in the UK. Don't know if it's the same way you are. And realised that a lot of that, young girls, all waxed off, think everything else is disgusting, comes from porn. How they video it. So I wanted to get this message across and get them to really start thinking about, is that a choice, or actually are we feminists by doing this, or actually are we playing into that? That was the conversation. So I made a game whereby we had these dollies, like drawn out dollies, like a dress dolly, and I'd done different shaped pubic hairs through the years. From the Victorian merkin, because you wanted to have loads of pubic hair because it means you're fit, you haven't got an STI, and you're of childbearing age, it means you're young, right the way through. And they were fascinated. This got this conversation going in a way I could never have got it to go, because I couldn't have got them to talk about it. But they thought it was funny, it made them laugh, and it made them really think about how does things like pornography impact and influence what we might see as empowering for our own bodies, and where do those fashions come from, those aesthetics? And that's that. So that got that conversation going. It got us all talking and laughing and people sharing stuff because it was fun. Nobody had to say anything that was out there. Nobody had to talk about the pornography. That was not what this was about. But I couldn't have, it was a good way to get that conversation going. Now, the youth workers that were with me when I did that said, that's brilliant. Can we have a set? So we made some more sets. And that's often how things go. We learn from each other, youth workers, don't we? So you see something, you like how somebody works with somebody. You think, oh, I'll have a go at that. How does that go? And that's what my books are, really, are those things. So creativity has come through that now.
What a wonderful way to reach young people, and to always be thinking of unique and new ways to connect with them so that they feel comfortable talking about the topic. And it sounds like you're so good at doing that. I know you have a passion for, in particular, working with young girls that are sometimes trafficked, the unnoticed girls who don't make the noise, and like the boys, they don't throw bricks through the window or get in fights, but they're struggling just as much. Can you talk a little bit about where your passion for helping exploited young girls comes from, and kind of why that's so important to you?
Yeah, for sure. Probably some of it's to do with having been a girl that I didn't think was listened to. People were looking in the wrong direction. Yeah. They weren't looking at what was really going on for me at all. And I became a parent very young, and it was the making of me. But people often judge me for that, whereas I think it changed my life for the better completely. And I thought, there's got to be other people like this. And the more stuff I did with young parents, and then I started looking at, okay, how those relationships that they were in, and realised that there is, you know, they were in some really bad relationships, either felt stuck in them or had fallen into them, and thought, okay, we need to do work on that positive relationships. And that kind of, alongside all the stuff I'd done with youth justice, working with young people, just realised there's some really vulnerable girls out there whose self-esteem is totally caught up in feeling attractive or sexy. And that age group is getting younger and younger and younger due to the influence of things like, you know, social media, whatever it, keeping up the Kardashians.
Yes.
You can blame it on everything. It's just popular culture. But from the age, I realised girls from the age of maybe even as young as 7 or 8 are seeing themselves and valuing themselves only in terms of how they look. And that can't be right. You know, so very much around encouraging young women to be themselves, and that you are more than how you look. Other things are really valuable about you too. You know, like that you're kind, or you're caring, or you're a great listener, or you're a great cook. It doesn't matter. You know, there are other things. And girls' work allows you to do that, really. You know, so often we'll work with young women who have been bullied, or who have been in really poor relationships, so domestic abuse, or have been, you know, trafficked, have been sexually abused, and trying to build that confidence and that value back up in them so that they feel, I am okay. That for me is real success. They can look in the mirror and say, you know what? I like what I see. And that's so important.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting listening to you talk. You are teaching young girls and young women to be themselves and to be individualistic, find who they are and where their niche can be, so that they. And I think it's interesting how you said that part of your experience growing up and not feeling heard and questioning, like, why do things have to be the way they are? And you were like set up to do this work. You've got all the right tools. You're smart, you're creative, your parents encouraged you to be who you are. All those things are what you have to do to be a good youth worker. And I wonder, have you thought much about how that connection is there? Or is it just something you go through and not really ponder that too much?
Probably a bit of both. I hadn't particularly, but then that wasn't quite true. You know, I had a very socially aware grandfather because I first started off working in youth homelessness. And he had taken me up to show me St Giles in the Field, which is a big soup kitchen in London, when I was about 5. And I said, well, why are... I said, what are they doing, those men? And it's like, they're queuing up to get soup. And during the Great Depression, after the First World War, so did I have to with my brothers. And I was like, well, why don't you go home for your dinner? He was like, because some people don't have homes. And I just thought that was so shocking.
Yeah.
And he took the time to sort of talk to me and explain how that happened and why some people would be homeless. And I guess that talking to you about learning, and whether that's about, you know, particularly the East End of London is a real diverse mix of cultures. And, you know, there's this sort of saying that every creed and race washes up in the East End at some point through the docks that were. That, you know, there was an interest, and I was brought up to have an interest in others as well. So, yeah, I do see where it comes from. And certainly being so angry, I spent such a lot of time as a teenager feeling so angry and so wanting to just rip everything down. But I wasn't really angry. I was just frustrated. And so I kind of get that for other people. But it is different to working through your own stuff. That is not what I'm trying to do here. But I do recognise that some people don't have the spaces, they don't have the opportunities. It's not even about the money, because I come from, you know, poor working class background. But I was given value. So it's about, I was given value as a person and respect, and I grew up with self-respect. And that's what I want for others.
And look what that did for you. And it made you be a person that has committed your life to helping other people find that value themselves and setting up an infrastructure and support systems for young people so they can go through the same experience you had. I think it's wonderful that you've used all your tools and all your creativity to just throw yourself into this work and make the world a better place. I have a kind of a deep question for you, and I'm wondering, if you could go back now, the things you know, all the experiences you've had in life, all the self-reflection and the self-awareness that you have done, what would you say to your younger self, that angry, pink-haired girl who was questioning everything at school? What would you go back and tell her?
I'd say be less angry, dance more. It'll be all right. And, actually, ultimately, you'll get your voice heard. But just don't be quite so angry, because it spoils a lot of the fun along the way. Because actually, I still feel the same as I did then. I don't understand why things have to be the way they are. Why? Why can't you kick against the doors and be who you want to be? You can. But the door opens easier if you're not shouting and bashing on it. So maybe it's learning the skills to get the door opened faster. Yeah.
A really good advice you would give to yourself, your younger self. And I think about how that is relevant to so many of our young people today, as we see them as angry. And it's easy to write that off as a character flaw or something that they're just being difficult. They don't want to cooperate, all that. But your life is the epitome of an example of, it really wasn't so much about anger. It was about, I just got to find my way and I don't understand all these things. And that's what so many of our young people are going through. And we want to write them off as just being difficult, awful young people, like your school did to you.
Yeah.
And I think that you could bring that to this field in such a wonderful way. I think when you're working with young people.
Sorry, I think
go ahead.
Anger is a bad thing. It's not. It's just one of your emotions. But often you respond. What we do is we respond to that anger, and we need to be responding to what's going on underneath. It's not really the anger, because anger's not really the primary emotion. I'm showing him anger. But underneath, I'm a teenager who's not quite sure where I fit in, and am I good enough? And, I'm cross that I don't like the rules, and I don't seem to understand why we have to do stupid things. And why can't I be in the art room all the time doing what I like? If they're responding to that bit, rather than focusing on the anger, it would have been a lot easier, wouldn't it? Do you know what I mean? So yes. We try and take people's anger away from them. We tell them that, well, don't be angry. That's not very nice. That's not very polite behaviour. Calm down and all that stuff. Whereas actually, that's exactly what I hope wouldn't happen. Whereas actually, anger is justified. It has brought about some marvellous change. Young people are angry at the moment about the environmental issues. Yeah. Good. It's good anger. Hopefully it'll affect change. I'm so sorry.
Vanessa, it's been wonderful getting to know you, and you continue to do such great things for our field and bring awareness to the importance of understanding that individual side of every person. And it has been wonderful having you as a guest on the show. And I know that as you go through years of work here ahead of you, you are going to do incredible things for so many people. And it's been exciting to hear your story and to have you as a guest. So thank you for what you've done, and thank you for being a guest on The Passionate Youth Worker.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been such a pleasure to be here, and just so amazing, to be amongst those guests that you've had on. And hopefully, it'd be great to hear from more American youth workers. We need to do more together. The world's a small place.
Yes.
Well, quite big, but we can find the footsteps across.
Yes.
Okay.
Before we go, Vanessa, what words of wisdom or inspiration would you like to leave with the listeners?
For me, one thing I've learned about youth work is listen more than you speak. And often with young people, we're so keen to have that relationship. You know, we want to engage. We've got loads to tell them, loads to do. And if we just left that space, just leave it a little bit longer, the words kind of come out and we'll fill them. So listen more, speak less. That would be mine. And really listen to what they're saying and not just what we see. Thank you.